Welcome to today's webinar, Countering Website and Mobile Threats with Osterman Research and Risk IQ. My name is Bob Hanson. I'll be the webinar moderator, mostly in the background today. Just a few notes before we get started. We'll be recording today's session, and all attendees are in listen-only mode, so please text in your questions early and often. Let's look at the agenda right now, Michael, so we can get right into the content. There's a lot to cover today. Our first speaker will be Michael Osterman, Principal of Osterman Research. Our second speaker will be Elias Minosis, CEO of Risk IQ. And as I mentioned, we'll be taking questions during their presentations, as well as we'll have a formal question and answer period at the end. And at this point, I'll turn the webinar over to Michael Osterman. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, Bob, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank everybody who's here today. I'd also like to thank Risk IQ for sponsoring today's webinar. I think that we'll be able to provide you with some very useful information and maybe a way of thinking about mobile and web security that you might not have considered before. So just a little bit about Osterman Research so that you know where we're coming from in all this. We are an independent market research and consulting firm that is very focused on the messaging, web, and collaboration industries. We look essentially at anything that relates to how people communicate or collaborate in a workplace context. And so obviously we look at things like security, as we'll be discussing today, encryption, archiving, content management, what have you. We have a very strong emphasis on primary research. We use our own panel and we go to them regularly, really to understand the pain that they're experiencing in terms of managing security, protecting users, really just managing the overall IT infrastructure to further the goals of the business. And we'll be presenting some results of that research here today. The company was founded in 2001, and we're based near Seattle, Washington, which today looks nothing like this picture. It's very gray and rainy today up here. So basically, as we all know, I mean, this is a very obvious point, but your customers are moving toward mobile applications. They're moving toward the web and so forth, what many call the third platform, away from the first platform of mainframes, the second platform of more traditional client-server, and really to an environment in which your data, your applications, your brand essentially are being distributed via mobile applications, via the web, via the cloud, and so forth. So enormous expansion into mobile and the cloud, and creating lots of security problems, as we'll be discussing here today. And as use of the third platform increases, the control over the user experience essentially is decreasing. You have less control over that user experience simply because it's so widely distributed among so many venues like app stores and cloud-based tools, websites, and so forth. So this is an enormous problem, and organizations in many cases are still just getting their hands around this. So the fundamental question that we want to discuss today is, should you as a brand, as a company, as a provider of a mobile or a cloud or a web experience to your customers, protect those customers? Do you have the responsibility of protecting your customers' online experience, or do you just leave that to the customers and let them fend for themselves? And this is a fundamental question because a lot of organizations are quite divided on this. Some believe that it's completely their responsibility to manage that experience. Others believe that it's completely the customer's requirement to protect themselves from the bad things that can happen. And then there are lots of companies in between. So this is really a fundamental issue that organizations have to address. And we ran a survey for Risk IQ recently, and one of the things we asked about was protecting customers. Just how important is this? Now, this can vary obviously by the organization, by the brand, by how customer-facing you are, whether you're B2C or B2B, and so forth. But what we found in the research is that only 1 out of 8 organizations believes that protecting their customers' online experience, mobile experience, and so forth, is actually their highest priority above everything else. Only 1 out of 8 really consider protecting their customers to be their absolute highest priority above everything else. Now, the good news is that another 49% think that this is a very high priority. So we see, well over half of organizations that consider protecting the customer's online experience to be a really high priority. That's the good news. The bad news is that for a lot of other customers, a fairly significant proportion, nearly 2 out of 5, They think it's important, but there are other priorities, and that can come back to bite you, as we'll see in just a few minutes here, in a variety of ways, through a bad mobile experience, through data theft, data breaches, and so forth. Now, we also asked in the same survey about the various kinds of problems that organizations are experiencing and just how serious those problems are to them. And as you can see here, for more than 2 out of 5 organizations, protecting their customers, protecting their organization against a website attack is an extremely serious problem. It's also, extremely serious in the context of managing their web properties appropriately, all of the websites and all of the pages that they have out there, potential brand impersonation, as you might find through a copycat mobile application, the compromise of apps through app stores and so forth. So, certainly there are a lot of problems that organizations consider extremely serious and also serious. What we do find, though, is that for a lot of organizations, they don't really worry very much about, compromise of apps through app stores or malware infiltration of mobile apps. And, it's certainly, this is obviously going to depend on the organization and the industry you're in, and, if you're B2B or B2C, but there probably should be more red and orange on this chart than there is. And one of the things we find in our research is that organizations tend to be fairly reactionary. They wait until a problem has happened before they do a lot about it. We've seen some very high-profile breaches of retailers recently, and there are probably things that retailers could have done to prevent those breaches or to at least limit the scope of the damage, and that they didn't do. So, if we had a little bit more red and orange on this chart, if it flowed a little more to the right, I think all of us would be better off. Not only the brands that have been compromised, but also the customers who have been affected by this. So, there are a lot of organizations that think these problems are serious. They're doing something about it. They want to give, customer protection the highest priority, but the problems are still getting worse. For example, the ITRC recorded 614 breaches in its 2013 breach list, and that was an increase of 30% compared to 2012. Malware delivered through web advertisements or malvertising has increased by about 300% over the past couple of years. And the number of risky or malicious Android mobile apps has increased very significantly. So despite the fact that people think this is a really important issue to protect their customers, and they're spending lots of money on trying to do that, the problems are still getting worse. Organizations are still experiencing these breaches. Customers are getting compromised, data is being stolen, money is being stolen, and so forth. So obviously there needs to be a better way of approaching these issues. And certainly if you look at the online experience, it's absolutely essential, whether it's a consumer-facing shopping site or people dealing with a bank or B2B transactions and so forth. And I won't go through all of these, but certainly it's important to note, and this is data from Walker Sands, that 64% of consumers employ their mobile devices while shopping in traditional brick-and-mortar stores so that they can research products. They can, stamp a QR code or, do some sort of pricing research or comparative research of some kind. So obviously the mobile experience is absolutely essential to just about everything you do as any kind of a retailer, whether you're an online retailer or a traditional one. We also found in our own research at the bottom bullet here that about 3 out of 5 financial services firms consider data leakage or security to be a serious or a very serious issue. So these are obviously issues that you must address, regardless of the kind of brand you are and regardless of the kind of customer you have. So how do customers access your brand? Well, certainly it's, they access it through legitimate mobile applications, through legitimate web properties and so forth. Your website, your online shopping experience, the mobile apps that you produce and you put on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, whatever other app stores are out there. But they also access it through bogus mobile apps, and this is a growing problem. Copycat apps where a cyber criminal will essentially impersonate your app or create one that uses your brand and then draw customers, let's say through a mobile app store that might not be as protected as, let's say, the Apple App Store. And they'll download that and then reveal lots of sensitive information like login data, credit card information, and so forth to cyber criminals. They'll do the same thing through bogus websites. And this is an enormous problem, both with infected legitimate websites, as well as completely bogus sites that are intended merely to steal consumer and other customer information. Customers also access your brand through legitimate and active websites or website components, like things like advertising banners that might have been affected by cyber criminals, or they might have done it through hijacked web pages that are maintained on corporate websites, but that the organization has simply forgotten about. There may be specific web pages out there that simply aren't managed anymore because a department doesn't manage them anymore. An individual who was responsible for them has left, and so forth. So there are lots of legitimate ways that customers are accessing your brand, but lots of illegitimate ways as well. So the bottom line here is that your customers are being exploited. It's quite common for users to be asked to accept, a wide variety of permissions when downloading mobile apps. For example, if you download a mobile app, even a legitimate one, it will ask for a lot of permissions. Maybe to be able to post to your Facebook feed, post for you on Twitter, access your friends, and so forth. And customers have generally been trained to accept these permissions without question. They don't really understand all of the implications of what that means. If an app, for example, can post for you, or if it can access all of your friend information and you click accept, then you're really opening up a lot of your privacy, a lot of your potential customer-facing information to good guys, but also in many cases to bad guys. And also, customers will typically accept intrusive questions, like asking for all your friends, even if they don't seem to make sense. A customer may not know why this particular application wants to access all your friends on Facebook, but many times they'll just accept it anyway because they want the functionality that that app provides. And so bad guys really can gain access to private data. And also, when customers are visiting websites, they'll often see security pop-ups, and they might be concerned about their safety, and that reflects badly on you as a brand. So if you have a completely legitimate website and you're doing a legitimate transaction, or trying to anyway, and a customer sees this pop-up, that may signal at least a yellow flag, if not a red flag, about your brand, your company, and really the overall trustworthiness of how organizations are going to deal with you. So who do customers blame? If you get burned by something like the Target breach, if you get burned by a copycat mobile app, what have you, who are they going to blame? Well, in most cases, exploited customers are going to blame you. They're not going to blame the bad guys so much. They will know implicitly that, yes, there was a cyber criminal out there that did this, maybe somebody in Eastern Europe or Russia or, who knows where that stole your data, but they're going to go to the brand that allowed that to happen. For example, with Target, during December 2013, which was the month that followed the breach that we've all heard about, Target shoppers increased by only 3%, yet it's typical for shopping to increase by, or the number of shoppers to increase by 7 to 10% during December. Obviously because of the holidays. So this, a lot of people blamed Target for the breach, even though they were responsible for it to an extent, but it was really bad guys that were out stealing your data. Also, about 1/3 of U.S. households shopped at some sort of a Target property in January 2014. That was the lowest figure in 3 years, and nearly, or more than a 20% drop from January of 2013. So clearly, people blamed Target for the breach. And yes, Target had a lot of culpability, but it was fundamentally the cyber criminals that stole this data. And we can certainly expect the same for Home Depot. 56 million debit and credit cards have been breached. We don't have a lot of details at this point about what occurred. There's some anecdotal information, but not a lot of really hard evidence to know exactly what happened with Home Depot. But this is a major breach, and presumably using the same malware that affected Target. So again, expect a lot of fallout from Home Depot, a lot of press reports in both sort of the public-facing press as well as the trade press about this in the coming months. And there's really more bad news. A company called Interactions found that following a data breach with a retailer, 12% of that retailer's local customers simply aren't going to shop with them anymore. They simply cut them off because they're afraid of their data being breached next. 36% will reduce their shopping frequency. Again, another major consequence. And about 4 out of 5 are going to be less likely to spend money at that retailer because they want to use cash instead of credit cards, and so they're not going to be as free with their spending. They're not going to make those impulse purchases and so forth. So if you as a retailer, for example, have a major data breach, you can expect a significant drop-off in revenue. But also there are other consequences. Going back to Target again, people lost their jobs, the CIO, the CEO, and there are probably others that we didn't hear about that lost their job because of this breach. Another consequence, as with the example of Citigroup here, after a breach, regulators are going to put a lot of pressure on banks, financial institutions, whoever suffers the breach, to make sure that this thing doesn't happen again. And, because we have election years in the United States every 2 years, you can expect this to be, at least in some districts, a sort of an election issue. Regulators are going to want to say, and politicians will want to say, we need to do something about this to protect constituents, whatever the case may be. So there's lots of fallout from any sort of a data breach, stuff that you can quantify very easily in terms of lost revenue, but also longer-term things in terms of damage to brand and so forth. So why is the problem happening in the first place? Well, the web was never designed with security as an important consideration. Certainly the web is a fantastically useful tool, but when it was first commercialized, when the internet was first commercialized back in the early 90s, they never really thought very much about security. And it was obviously very difficult to foresee the kinds of problems that we would have today in the context of malware and the increasing sophistication of criminals. But the web is just not a secure place fundamentally. Also, website growth is very rapid. There are now over 1 billion different websites out there, and the number continues to grow. We've seen just exponential growth over the past 20 years, and that growth shows no sign of abating. So we have an insecure system that's growing rapidly, which is, to some extent, just a recipe for disaster from a security perspective. We're also seeing rapid growth in mobile apps. There are 1.6 million apps in the Apple App Store and Google Play stores combined. Those numbers continue to grow quite nicely. There's a total of 7 million apps as of July 2014 in a variety of other third-party stores and so forth. And ABI Research estimated that last year 56 billion smartphone apps were downloaded. And apologize for the typo there. So again, we have rapid growth in mobile apps, and because of that, because of the lack of security and so forth, we're finding a lot of copycat apps here. Malvertising, another serious issue. Malicious advertising, it's a very common problem. You've probably experienced it many times without even knowing about it. And so web exploits and malicious mobile apps are common, and they're definitely on the increase. We just see more and more of these kinds of things, including more sophisticated kinds of attacks over time. Oops. So in terms of the consequences, fundamentally, bad guys are stealing your brand, and your brand is valuable. Whether you're a financial services company, a retailer, a manufacturer, whatever the case may be, if you have interactions on a B2B or B2C basis, bad guys are potentially stealing your brand, and in many cases definitely are. Many times customers won't use your mobile apps. If there's a copycat application that's stealing information and that gets publicized, customers simply are going to stay away from your mobile app, and they won't interact with your brand and your company, and they won't buy things simply because of that. You can experience very long-term damage to your corporate reputation. Going back to Target and certainly with Home Depot, we're going to see long-term ramifications in terms of lower revenue, less trustworthiness of those brands, and it's going to take, if it can even happen, it's going to take many, many years for that trust to be rebuilt and for customers once again to have the confidence that they can rely on those brands and rely that their data and their financial information isn't going to be stolen. You as an organization that gets breached could receive fines and sanctions, very common in the healthcare industry, very common in financial services. We're going to see this really across the board in a variety of industries as data breaches occur and so forth. And many of these fines and sanctions can be quite expensive, particularly if you're dealing with legal issues. If somebody goes to court over this, there's already been, I believe, something like $61 million spent on the Target breach. There's going to be many more lawsuits over time that come up. And here's really the double whammy. When the victim is the vehicle for criminals, again, as in the case of a retailer that gets breached, the victim's brand is devalued. So not only are the initial victim of the cyber criminal, but now they suffer long-term damage because their brand continues to degrade over time as people simply don't trust them to protect information. So it's absolutely essential that you do something about this because it can have very long-term ramifications for your company. Now, defenses, what we found in our research, simply are lacking. We did a survey for RiskIQ, and we found that only 15% of organizations really have deployed some sort of a solution that will monitor app stores for usage of their brand and malicious intent. So we find really only 1 out of 7 organizations is really doing anything about monitoring mobile app stores when they have mobile apps available for their customers. We found that only 8% of mobile app managers really are what they would consider to be very aware of the security issues that are impacting mobile app stores. So again, 2 very serious issues. 1, people aren't aware of the issue, and 2, those that aren't doing much about it. So this is a very serious issue for organizations that have any sort of mobile or web presence. These numbers need to be dramatically higher than they are now. We also found that only about a quarter of organizations absolutely never scan mobile app stores to check for rogue or malicious apps. So, they know intellectually that these problems occur. They know that the copycat applications may exist that impersonate their brand, but they're not doing anything about it. So again, a very serious issue. There needs to be the awareness, but there also needs to be the action that the decision makers are taking to really do something about solving these problems. So what should you do? Well, certainly you need to change the security model. You need to focus very heavily on, how you approach security for your mobile apps, for your web properties, and so forth. You need to manage things from a security perspective, in a very rigorous and very controlled and regular way. Companies need to keep up with the changing threat landscape. They need to understand what's going on with the sophistication of malware, with malvertising, with potential access to their unused web properties, and so forth. It's also essential that you understand what's happening to your customers in real time. You need not, it's important obviously to know after the fact, but it's absolutely critical to know in real time so that you can detect a threat and do something about it before it has the ability to do widespread damage to your brand and your company and your customers as well. And you actually need to find exploits that are being delivered to your customers, not just those that are in the wild or that could potentially impact your customers, but those that actually are. There are certain types of threats that are probably going to be more impactful to you than others. You need to know specifically what those threats are. Then you need to implement a solution that can provide very deep inspection across every possible attack venue, website properties, mobile apps, and so forth. And you need to enable protection on every possible front to protect your customers, because fundamentally you are responsible for their online experience. Whether you like it or not, customers are going to blame you for any sort of a data breach or other problem they experience using your brand, and so you are ultimately responsible for doing something about it. Okay, and that concludes my part of the presentation. I'd like to hand it over to Elias for his presentation. And also just want to remind everybody we will be holding the drawing for the iPad mini or the Amazon.com gift certificate right after the question and answer period, and I do encourage you to ask your questions. So Elias, I'll let you take it away.
So once again, Michael, thank you for working with us on the study, and today I'm going to cover some of the web and mobile threats that we've seen. We've got some use cases, and we're going to dig into just additional recommendations. The first point that I wanted to build on was the consumer and the user in this case lives almost completely outside of the corporate perimeter, and that's a very big change from other threats that we've been dealing with over the last 15, 20 years in information security. Typically, we can put up a firewall, or we can deploy an agent. We can do something very specific to capture the threat and either block it or react to it. But in this case, the mobile device, third-party web properties, systems that we're hosting in cloud infrastructure, those systems live outside on the internet, and the consumer is directly communicating with that mobile device or with that web property without any firewall or agent in between them. And the cost of an attacker to actually put up a rogue mobile application or a decoy website, think of a phishing website as an example, is very, very low compared to the cost of actually controlling this. So really, this is a real difficult problem, and malware, online fraud, again, phishing, and these are problems that have been around for a long time. The traditional defenses on the perimeter, agent-based technologies like antivirus, they don't do very much to put us into control, and so there's really a visibility problem in how we can extend the perimeter into where the consumers are actually finding our web assets, our mobile assets, and giving the security team access to this information so that they can respond to it in real time. So that's sort of the framing of the problem here. So in order to do this, there's some new technologies that need to be put in place and in order to be proactive. And one of them is actually know what is out there that your customers are encountering. And to do that in real time, you need some way. You can't actually monitor. You have to have some way to scan the assets that you have, the third parties that you rely on, partners that run your infrastructure for you in the case of cloud computing, or websites or mobile applications that you've maybe outsourced to a third-party developer. And you need to be alerted somehow to when exploits actually are deployed from those assets directly to your customer or from a decoy asset. And again, it's easier said than done. So some of the things that we've seen, questions that can come to bear here is, what do I have out there? What assets do I have? What mobile applications are we deploying? In a large enterprise, typically there could be hundreds of mobile applications, and for web properties, it could be thousands of web applications. Just think of the marketing website that you put up for a particular promotion that may only be up for a couple of weeks, or maybe it's just targeting a specific event. Once that event is gone, then that website should really be turned off or decommissioned or merged into something else. But all too often, those sites do not get pushed through the risk management process, and they are not taken offline. So we've also noticed that there's some old techniques that could be used primarily around understanding the data that you have and the domains that that data runs on. For example, which websites have login capability? Where are you collecting personally identifiable information? Are there any domain names out there that mention your brand? We detected a website just in the last week that had the name of jQuery-CDN in the web domain. And that domain was not owned by the group that publishes the jQuery libraries and was being used as a method to distribute malware through an exploit kit. So in that case, simple monitoring of domain brands would actually help quite a bit in understanding what might be out there. Once you find a rogue domain, the other part of it is actually having the session information to prove that there's something wrong or that there's something bad that's actually happening out there. So we've broken this down into three specific pieces. One is and this all is outside of your firewall that could directly target a consumer. The first is, what are the threats? And this is probably the most important point. And what are the threats that are targeting you now in real time? Phishing attacks, malware attacks, unwanted email, defacement of some of your properties. Is there anything that's happening right now? Think of it like the fire alarm, because if it is, you need to know about it and actually respond quickly. And without anything between that web property and the consumer, you will find out once the news article hits the press or once consumers start complaining. So we need some way to actually find out in advance. The second area is there's some basic compliance issues that come up with outside the firewall assets. Because we have no way of actually blocking and scanning these assets dynamically, we have to scan them from a third-party perspective, from the outside looking in. So understanding what assets you have that are collecting personally identifiable information, if there's third parties that may have access to that data, perhaps through referrers, it could be someone that you are using to run a widget on a website, it could be an advertising banner ad. These systems, which are normal, sometimes end up having access to data on a web page that you're not aware of. And then the third area, and this is one I think that has led to a lot of breaches recently, is really just hygiene of your web properties and keeping a clean infrastructure that you have organized. And so we just put this under the term of governance. But do you know what sites you have? Are they registered to you? Do you have an abuse process to respond? Are you aware of any SSL issues or other issues with the way that those web applications are operating? And often we look at our websites and our mobile applications from the perspective of our corporate perimeter, and that they may not actually behave in the way that we think they're actually behaving. This is sort of my last slide on high-level stuff. I'm going to dig into some examples, and I think this will help highlight some of the issues. So the first example here is a recent zero-day that targeted some major websites, and I just have the CVE on the screen and an example of some of the code. It's highlighted in blue, asmmedia.net. And this was a flash-based zero-day attack that had been infiltrated through third-party component. And we read about this through a popular blog. This is actually a screenshot of the blog when this hit. And the blogger was talking about all these high-ranking, quote, high-ranking websites that were feeding an unknown exploit kit at the time. And again, this was a flash-based zero-day. And we looked into this, again, from the consumer's perspective of what this attack looked like. We started to see a trend, and the trend that we noticed across roughly 500 different websites, big sites like BBC, Vice Magazine, and many others, actually MSN, Yahoo, many other major sites, was that the one thing that they shared in common was a analytics widget, and we used that information to figure out what went wrong here. I mean, the security teams did everything right at those companies. Their code was okay. There was nothing wrong with their web application security at all. But what did go wrong was they relied on a third-party vendor, in this case Effective Measure, to provide analytics tracking for their websites. And inside the packet trace, which you're looking at now, we can see coming off of the BBC's website, there is this cdn.effectivemeasure.net serving up some JavaScript. And then a little bit further down the chain, there's the asmmedia.net attack URL that served up the zero-day. So in this case, just by simply including this JavaScript from the third-party analytics provider, that provides the vector for the attacker. The actual attack code was very simple. If you had scanned this inside a test environment on the firewall, you would have detected it. The trouble is this website analytics code only renders in the customer's browser. It's not actually rendering on the server. It's just rendering out in the browser. So there's no way for the firewall, whether it's a web application firewall or any other firewall, to detect this. So our next example is a rogue mobile application. And the thing about rogue mobile applications is they tend to use brands as lures. And this is an example for Aetna Insurance. And when we first saw this, the immediate question that we had was, what really could be going on here? Why would why would anyone want to put up an Aetna mobile application? What's the scam? And by digging a little deeper, we noticed that this particular developer, again, looking across the internet from the customer's perspective, had a very similar pattern targeting other brands. You can see on the screen Target, Olive Garden, Family Dollar, and others with a similar pattern for the naming of the apps with ++ on the end of the brand name. So when we saw this, we determined there must be some way that this bad guy is monetizing the attack. And digging a little deeper, you can see the actual developer, his name and what he's posting on Twitter, and another app he had here for TJ Maxx. What they all had in common, again, there's a theme here if you're getting it, is that they're relying on a third party. And in this case, the developer was using a third party called eDelia. And this eDelia company claims that they are providing really an advertising service for marketers to measure social intent. And so that was pretty interesting. We saw this similar mobile SDK code used in all of these malicious apps. And the chain of events here was, and it's a little confusing, so bear with me. When the user downloads the Rogue Aetna application, the eDelia SDK was taking personally identifiable information from the user, specifically here on the right, the phone number, their Facebook login handle, and their Twitter login handle, and they're sending that information to the eDelia ad network. The eDelia ad network then sells a lead service, so now they know Aetna's application was downloaded. They know that what the user's phone number is, and they also know contextual information about what that person is posting on Facebook and Twitter. They take that information and bundle it up and sell it off to the highest bidder, in which case that creates a SMS push ad to the consumer. And so now the user who's just downloaded this Aetna application is seeing, hey, let's maybe sign up for a rival insurance provider or some type of add-on service. And so these leads are very valuable. We've seen them range from, on the low end, $5 a lead, and on the high end, hundreds of dollars a lead, depending on the brand that they're targeting. And this is just one example. So eDelia is pretty pervasive. Just this one rogue advertiser has over 694 apps across the app stores. And again, this developer has many different apps that they've put out. Our third example is more of a traditional mobile malware. And what makes this one interesting is it's one of the first examples of mobile malware that has successfully targeted some of the financial services institutions. And so we received this email from a partner, talking about this. It's called SpendPang, and it kind of hit the news a while back. So it's really great when you get these when your company gets these panic emails saying, hey, what's going on with this particular attack? I mean, everybody gets these. So that was really stemmed from a series of articles that hit the press talking about this SpendPang mobile malware, which was able to spread through the text messaging services. But we actually found out it did a lot more than spread through text messaging. It was also spreading through mobile advertising, which we'll show some examples there. When you looked at this binary, it became clear it definitely was interested in mobile banking activity, and in the code, it tested to see if these various American banks had been installed. These banking applications had been installed on the consumer's device. It then went and probed different SMS. It was able to transact money from very specific Russian banks that allow for electronic transactions from mobile devices, and it harvested credentials and from specific banks and those credentials back to a server. The other function in this app was it acted like ransomware. So the consumer would be prompted with something that looks very similar to the Play Store, asking them to re-enter their credit card information. This is not the Play Store. So it attempted to fool the consumer into providing their credit card information along with the other details about the card that the attacker could use to use that card successfully. If that didn't work, the third thing it did was it actually tried to lock the device. And we've seen this type of attack on the PC where you're presented with a cryptographic lock on the device, like, hey, you can't use your computer until you pay us some money. In this case, they showed an FBI banner and then allowed the consumer to enter a money pack voucher for to unlock the device. This actually didn't successfully lock the device. It just annoyed the user, and many users would fall for it and provide the money pack. So this is the way that this particular malware was distributed, and of course no one's going to go out and install a piece of malware. So what the attackers did in this case was they used Adobe Flash as the vehicle, and the consumer would expect, oh, I want to see a video, so in order to see a video, of course, I might need the Flash player. And so here's some of the binaries that we detected. And the thing that was interesting about this attack, and it goes back to the topic of the webinar, is the distribution method was mobile advertisements. So it wasn't in the App Store. It wasn't that the consumer went to a website. It was that they saw a mobile ad and they clicked on that mobile ad, and that mobile ad then prompted them to install the Flash player. When you look at some of the binaries, you can see there's just total excessive permissions. Here's the other Flash binary, again with the same excessive permissions. When you look at what the consumer would see, it would be very different than what the legitimate Flash player would ask for. So again, when you look at these, what the consumer behavior is to just approve and give away their privacy. It's very difficult for the average consumer to understand what is legitimate and what isn't legitimate, especially when it's downloaded in this way. The virus detection was extremely low. So of the 52 or 53 AVs that we tested this against, only 2 of them actually flagged it as malicious, and unfortunately these 2 AV vendors often have false positives, so they're not very popular on mobile handsets. This is just a takeaway. When we looked at the certificate that the developers had used, it was obviously spoofed, and I think for everyone on the call who works with mobile development teams, it's critical that you have accurate information in the signing certificate for your mobile applications. I think over time, this is a very good method for asserting who the rightful author is and building a chain of trust, like we all know with encryption and signing. And so obviously Steve Jobs was probably not the guy who wrote this app, and Avast, which is an AV company, again, is probably not the organization that was responsible for dispensing mobile malware. Looking inside the contents of the app, we can see some clear signs that with the MoneyPack logo, that this is indeed the same malware, as well as the traffic of the applications. So studying the traffic of mobile applications, looking at the contents, these are all things that incident response teams, CERT teams have to do when they're studying a threat. So the last thing on this particular attack is we wanted to show roughly how the install happened. And one of the ways, we omitted the screenshot here, was it's a little cliche, but porn websites were being used, as well as ads that were leading to adult websites, and that made a lot of sense when we looked at some of these because the flash player would be necessary to play video. That was just one of the vectors, but there was other vectors with viral videos. And the ad network that was used was called bytraf.ru, and we included some of the code that's used to actually buy the bytraf.ru ad network to display this ad. So bytraf is, and this is a translation, they provide installs, roughly 1,000 installs for $5. And the real takeaway here is, again, if the attacker can make more than $5 per 1,000 installs of this bogus flash player, then they're sort of making money. And that's what drives this economy and drives this particular use case. Unlike the Aetna use case, they monetize through rogue affiliate and ad networks. This is also related to rogue a mobile ad network where the actual payout is based on an install, not on the actual data that's stolen. What you can do about this in the mobile malware sense, if you're the victim of a piece of rogue or mobile malware, and your brand is being used, we have noticed that the bad guys will do tests, and this is an example of how a test will run many, many days in advance. Then they'll do a campaign, so you see a 4-day campaign, and then they wait a little while, and then there's another campaign, 4- or 5-day campaign. And the reason for this is they're testing their infrastructure, they're kind of getting everything right, because in order to run these ads and to buy traffic in the criminal underground, it does cost them money. So they want to make sure that the scheme is working and they're able to monetize the scheme. And so by detecting things quickly, this is a very, very good way of responding and actually preventing your brand from being targeted. So just to wrap it up, know what you have an inventory of what your official apps are. This enables you to respond quickly. Understand what security you have around your web and mobile apps, how you can work with the community to alert them of rogue activity so that we can all share that information and get these rogue applications and rogue websites removed. And it really starts with knowing what you have. Work with enrichment and fuse intelligence. What are the third parties out there that put your business at risk, and how can you share information with your partners when they are attacked? This is another thing that we've all talked about: mobile and web vendor assessments. If you ask your vendor, hey, when have you been hacked, they're unlikely to tell you. So if you see or you suspect a third party of having an issue, it's going to be up to you to sort of prove and share that intelligence. I wanted to leave some time for questions, so just wrapping this up. So I'm going to skip ahead a couple slides. So what RiskIQ provides is outside the firewall security, and what this means is a method to protect your customer and understand what types of threats are out there in the internet, on the mobile device. And we do that through building a real-time discovery of all of your assets and providing you with real-time threat data on how your users are being attacked. And we do that with virtual user technology, so we mimic the users that are visiting your web and mobile assets and any rogue mobile assets out there. We've been collecting data. We have over 1 billion interactions a day on the web side and 7 million plus interactions a day on the mobile side. So that data gets baked into a threat intelligence system that our customers have access to, so that they can respond, just like in the 3 examples that we showed you. They can respond quickly, and therefore really increasing the cost on the bad guys so that they'll target someone else. We're the only security technology that does this from the customer's perspective, and that's really what we're all about, is helping you protect your customer and react quickly to attacks that happen outside of the firewall. We're fairly established, great customers across the Fortune 500, and have recently brought on some growth equity to grow our business. We're based out in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and really welcome any questions, and thank you guys.
Okay, great. Well, Elias, thank you so much. Great presentation, great content. So why don't we get right to the questions? First question we have, what was the penetration rate of Speng in the U.S.?
So that's a good question. What we know is what we were able to observe in our environment, and we were able to see on a daily basis anywhere from 5,000 to 50,000 triangulated incidents, which are observations of that piece of malware being distributed. We don't have exact counts because we can't see the consumer's computer, but it was fairly large. It was much larger in Europe.
Okay, very good. Another question, how much detail do you see in the redirect chain, and can you see referrers in that?
So that's a great question. Often what bad guys do is they mask the referrer, so the threat intel teams or the incident response teams are unable to see where the true source of the traffic. For example, in a phishing attack, they may redirect through multiple sequences so that you can't see where the attack originated from. So we're able to see the origin of the attack since we're actually running the top-level web page, and we can recreate all of the redirects using our technology.
Okay, great. Another question, what steps does RiskIQ take when you detect malware on a website, mobile app, or online advertisement?
The first step is we alert our customers. We alert the specific victim, that customer, if there is one. But we alert our customers through our real-time alerting system, and we provide them all of the data that they need to respond internally, as well as to advise either the mobile or web development team to fix the problem. The second thing that we do is we do provide an incident response service where we can reach out to the person that's hosting the app or the website and aid in the takedown process, and that is often necessary given that the attack site may be hosted by a rogue third party. So that could be through an ad network, it could be through just a regular hosting provider. So we do provide that incident response capability as well as the alerting.
Okay, great. And I just want to remind everybody to ask your questions through the interface. We'll go just a couple of minutes long to make sure that we do get to all the questions we've gotten. Another question, Elias, can you talk to how you virtually walk and capture the click-throughs of online or mobile ads?
Yeah, so yeah, that's another good detailed question. So the ads themselves run on the client web browser or in a mobile application. So it's important to have visibility into what the user's browser session or the mobile application environment. And we do that by creating a virtual user environment and replicating that interaction. So we render the ad just like it is rendering in a normal web browser. We render out all the interactions and click through that. Because we have that full packet capture all the way from the origin, we can assemble that and either call it a malvertisement, which is a malware in an ad, or a benign ad. And the only way to do that is to have the end from the beginning to the end of the ad chain, which is what we do.
Okay, very good. Another question, can you see changes in the DOM caused by malicious JavaScript?
So we do run all the JavaScript on a page, and by running all the actual JavaScript, we're able to see obviously anything that is written to the browser, and that would include any DOM changes, anything that's inserted into the page, like JavaScript, iframes, and we capture all that in an incident report that's made available to a customer. So the customers in their web logs typically will only see what resources were loaded or served by their web server. They don't actually see how it's assembled in the client browser. So we provide the other half of the data that's necessary to respond to the attack, which is the DOM object, all the loads in the actual client, either mobile or web browser.
Okay, very good. That's all the questions we've gotten so far. If anybody does have questions after the webinar, here's RiskIQ's contact information, and you saw mine earlier. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And we have conducted the random drawing for either the iPad mini or the Amazon.com gift certificate, and that winner is Angel Rodriguez of Dell. Angel, congratulations. We will be contacting you right after the webinar for further information from you. Once again, Elias, thank you so much for a great presentation. Thank you to the audience for being here, and Bob, I'll hand it back to you.